Good morning and welcome to the Hibs Observer post-match debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined as always by Patrick McPartlin. To take a look back over yesterday's 3-1 Scottish Cup win up at Inverness Kelly Thistle. Hibs running out pretty comfortable winners in the end. It was billed as a kind of potentially dangerous tie given recent form and the trip away up to the Highlands, a kind of well-organised side under Duncan Ferguson. But I think in the end, Patrick, I think Hibs made as light work of it as you could probably have expected.
I think so. Yeah, you look at the number of chances they had in the first half and in the second half as well before they started scoring goals, and it could have been a much more comfortable scoreline. And I think that's probably got to be a big positive to take when you consider how few chances there's been in games recently. Especially in the first half. Just off the top of my head, I think Eliza Mienda had a shot. Luke Amos had an effort. There were things from set pieces. Martin Boyle came close. I think Joe Newell had an effort. So you've got sort of players across the team are chipping in with attempts on goal. And then, rather than trying to change it or, reinvent the wheel, just keep on doing what you're doing, but do it better, which is it's kind of been a feature of Montgomery's teams, particularly early in his tenure at Hibs. We haven't seen it so much recently because, Plan A hasn't really been that good that, it's not a case of do what you do, but do it better. It's, could you do what I asked you to do? But certainly I thought, they looked pretty comfortable from, pretty much from the get-go yesterday and, went at a half-time, came back out for the second half and really just more clinical. And, obviously I think the substitutions made a bit of a difference. Ellie Yuan obviously coming on, getting the third goal, Dylan Levitt orchestrating it. But, good to see a mix of sort of like old and new contributing. Mizani Maulida with his second goal, very similar to his first goal against Kilmarnock actually. But it's just so many sort of positives to take from it, and it wasn't a perfect performance by any means, but it was what they call a professional performance. They got the job done. They got the win, got into the round, got into the half of the next round, and it wasn't. As you say, it wasn't a slog. It wasn't sort of Forfar Mark II. It was, pretty straightforward. And I think there was a lot of positives to take from it, a lot to like about the display, both collectively and individually.
Yeah, definitely. I think even though it went in 0-0 at half time, it didn't quite have that same feel as the Forfar game did. You had a feeling that something might actually happen here, whereas at Forfar, to be honest, you couldn't really see where it was coming from. Mm-hmm. It was better. It certainly looks as though the change of shape is here to stay now. There was a wee bit of chat pre-match. Was that just an adjustment for Celtic coming to town? Is Nick Montgomery going to go back to what he's stuck with throughout his time here in the 4-4-2 or sort of 4-2-3-1 as it had kind of become in the last few weeks? But no, credit to him. He's stuck with this 4-3-3, and it seems to be getting more out of players. Certainly, it's limited evidence so far. Again, you've got to take the caveat that yesterday was kind of low-end championship opposition, but they weren't a terrible side. Inverness, they were, they didn't carry much of a threat, but they were well organised. They were, sitting in a sort of 5-3-2, and I think it was the kind of setup and the kind of side were sort of dogged, hard-working players that might have turned yesterday into a real slogfest for Hibs over, especially, kind of what we've gotten used to watching just of late. But to be fair, I think that midfield it just looks better. It just looks better balanced with three in there. Mariah Welsh has certainly made a difference. He just adds, a kind of a bit of aggression. I feel that wasn't quite there before. And it kind of takes in some ways, it takes the heat off other players as well, because if you've got a guy in there who's, being aggressive and getting at people and, snapping at heels, winning tackles is part of his game, then it's kind of less onus on, guys like Joe Newell to then be everything all at once. You can kind of tell he's, I feel like he kind of strolled through the game yesterday. And kind of back to doing what he's good at, which is, on the ball. He's a ball player. It's just got a better, you had Newell as the kind of deeper line, number 6, and then it was Amos and Mariah Welsh ahead of him, and it just looked a bit better. You didn't have we've seen a lot at times, when it's been Newell and Levitt, they kind of want to play in the same areas. They're sort of sitting on top of each other at times. It just looked kind of a better balance. I think, Amos, he didn't have the best of games, to be fair to him, but I mean, he's not started the game in, God knows how long. You've got to give the guy a chance to get up to speed, and I think it's kind of, I wouldn't read too much into yesterday. I think he's probably, shown in the past that he is a good quality player, and it'll come good for him with the more minutes he gets. I think, obviously Martin Boyle was he ended up being the difference really between the two sides, a goal and assist. And I think, getting him in that role in a 4-3-3 where he can play high on the right, it suits him so much better, and then it gives other teams a problem straight away, because when you've got him playing on, that high right hand side, as opposed to tucking back in or playing through the middle as he was, that sort of nullified him. And he's just such a threat constantly on that side. I said Ewan made a difference when he came on as well, I thought. And it was Mazzani, Malida, who got the first goal. He kind of likes that area, doesn't he? It's the same kind of area he ended up picking up against Kilmarnock, wasn't it? He's sort of coming in off that left-hand side, and he likes that. I know it took a deflection, but he does seem to like that finish into the curled finish into the far corner. As I said, it's sorry, as you said, it's good to see different guys. I'm just completely taking the credit for you there. Different players contributing, but I just feel like it was a good. It was a good finish, even though it took a deflection, because he's left young James Carragher on the deck where we kind of dropped with the shoulder, and it might have went in anyway without the deflection. Who knows? But I think it was as much as you felt Hibs were in control of the game, I think it was a good time to get the goal, wasn't it? Because these cup ties, the longer they sort of drag on, that's when the underdog starts to grow in belief. We actually saw it maybe in reverse a wee bit against Celtic in midweek. The longer the game carried on, when Hibs, I know Hibs were behind, but they were still very much in it. They were kind of really causing Celtic problems. So I think the longer it goes on, I think the more Inverness sort of would have fancied it. So that was a good time to sort of take the wind out of themselves, I suppose, wasn't it?
It really was, and I think they'd had a couple of chances already in the second half. They picked up where they left off. At half time, I think I can't remember who it was, but somebody had a shot that Richards had done really well to save, and there was just a couple of stramashes in the box. And I think it's you look at the week as a whole for Hibs. Starting off on Saturday last weekend with that honking performance against St Mirren, just collectively, individually, just woeful. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. We were there, we all saw it, and then to have that performance in midweek against Celtic, to just night and day from last weekend in terms of performance, in terms of belief, in terms of just the sort of feeling that actually Hibs could get something here, and then the way it panned out. We're not going to turn this into another discussion about VAR and stuff like that, but the way it panned out, you can imagine Hibs feeling a little bit, or maybe a big bit unjustified, or the result was unjustified for them, feeling a bit hard done by. But I think what that performance on Wednesday night did was sort of told the fans that actually the St Mirren performance was hopefully a one-off, and with these new players who've come in January, and with players coming back from injury, you've got a healthier squad capable of putting in performances like Wednesday night and not making that the one-off and not making that sort of rare occurrence. Now, it's obviously difficult to go from playing at home against Celtic under the lights to playing away to Inverness on a cold, misty day. You're never going to get the same sort of performance. You're never going to get the same intensity. You're never going to get the same kind of sense of occasion. But I thought one thing was quite noticeable was that the sort of considerable Hibs support, mostly behind the Southend goal, were really kind of there was a lot of encouragement throughout the game. There was a lot of there was the singing, there was the chanting, and you just think if Wednesday night had been a kind of 4 or 5-0 defeat, then you maybe don't get that same level of backing. You then don't get the same level of performance, and then what turned out to be in the end a fairly comfortable win could have been a lot more difficult. Now, obviously, it works two ways. The players put performances in, and then the fans want to back them. But, at the same time, the fans give the backing to the players, and the players are sort of, they're encouraged to kind of, put a bit more in. And I think you certainly saw that. It was a good way to end what's been a difficult week for Hibs. And, with players coming back off the bench, Chris Cadden making his first appearance since, I think it was 27th of May, last year after he's come back from injury. I had Adam Lafondra getting minutes. And being able to rest players like Eliu and like Dylan Levitt, who've played quite a lot of football recently and maybe have been a bit jaded. And, you can maybe point to that as part of the reason for why last weekend was, just so awful. But, I just think that this Hibs team is based a lot on belief. And, Celtic's a good example. Obviously they lose the early goal, but, they played well. They're creating chances themselves. They had Eli Yuan's effort that he probably should have scored, but it creates that belief that actually, we could get something out of this game. We could do something here. And I think against Inverness, it was the same sort of process that they'd been plugging away in the first half with little success, and in the second half, they kind of picked up where they'd left off. They'd had a couple of efforts, but what you really needed was just an early goal to kind of settle any nerves that might have been there and to probably calm the fans a little bit as well. There wasn't certainly no audible discontent from the fans up until that point. I think they probably recognised that, this was, Hibs were doing their utmost to make it a fairly comprehensive passage into the next rounds. And in the end, that's what it was. But I think just to get the goal that the play deserved, probably, like you said, this took the wind out of Inverness's sails a little bit, and, probably relaxed Hibs a little bit as well. And I think you could see after that, they looked like they had another gear to go into. The changes helped. Obviously, Inverness making changes as well disrupted their backline a little bit, I think. But, you made a good point there. Like, getting Martin Boyle out on that right wing is just, it's where he's most comfortable. It's where he's at home. It's where he can do the most damage. And, if teams are doubling up on him, as they occasionally do, then, this sort of 4-3-3 is just a much better formation for, I suppose, getting more players, up there and attacking. Like, Emi Marcondes came on and was sort of, right behind Adam Lafondra. And then you've got Eli Yuan on the left, you've got Boyle on the right, you've got Levitt pushing forward as well. He had another effort that Richards saved well. And it just feels like, the fans were saying this for ages. We were saying it, the kind of 4-4-2, the 4-2-3-1 isn't really getting the best out of the Hibs squad at the moment. Now, maybe it's just, maybe 4-3-3 wouldn't have got the best out of the team, given how many players were out injured and on international duty. And it is early days. We've only seen it a couple of games so far, but the 4-3-3 just looks a lot more sensible for Hibs. It gets players in their best positions. It puts an extra man in midfield, and we've talked about Nathan Mariah Welsh. The fans have seen this. He's a really sort of hard-working, all-action midfielder. Exactly what Hibs had been missing. And I think just having him in there just frees up the other two midfielders to sort of play their game, and as a result, you get more out of them. Like, Joe Newell, another good performance yesterday. Dylan Levitt, okay, only on for the second half, but I felt he looked a lot more like the player Hibs thought they were getting when they signed him in the summer. And when you consider how sort of ineffectual he was last weekend, and just how much his confidence just looked to have been completely zapped. That goal in midweek, and then just having a bit of help, having a bit of help in the engine room just really seems to have brought something out of him that we haven't really seen so far. And it's just we've said this before, that having players back, or having players in certain positions, or having certain players in the park can just bring out so much from their teammates. And that's just sort of it's invaluable. Hibs aren't a one-man team. They've got players across the park who can make a difference, and it's just about getting those players on the park and getting them into the right positions in a formation that gets the best out of everyone individually and as a team.
Yeah, as you say, early days, the new system, the new shape. But I think yesterday was the kind of most in control of a game that I've felt Hibs have had for a while. Because there's been loads of games where they've had tons of possession, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that you are in control of the game. But it just felt that even when the goal wasn't coming at first, that they weren't really under any real kind of serious duress. Inverness, you're going to expect them to have the odd wee moment. What they did in the end, especially when they're chasing the game, they created a couple of chances, but I feel like the Hibs were just in total control of it, and I feel that they were able to sustain that throughout the game now as well, which is something we've not seen, because I think we talked quite a lot in that period pre-Christmas that when maybe when it got past the hour mark in games, that is when Hibs started to sort of lose their grip on it, and we sort of looked at it through the stats bomb data, and we could see that that there was a weird pattern of really round about the kind of 60-65 minute mark is when opposition who hadn't really been in the game until that point would then start creating chances, and it was kind of fairly obvious at the time that it was down to a sort of lack of depth, like not being able to continue the intensity that we'd seen up until that point. Either guys were being left on maybe that bit too long because there was nobody to come on and replace them, or as it was for a while, they were being replaced by just essentially academy players, and that's it's no slight on some of the younger boys, but it's difficult to expect them to come on and be immediately ready for first team Premiership football at that age. But I think what we're not only seeing now is it's not only more encouraging for Hibs fans when the team sheet comes out and they can look at it on paper and see XYZ is back on the bench, where that bench actually looks really strong, or we've got options to change it if we need to. It's actually yesterday was, and I think against Celtic as well, you can actually see that what you can see on paper sort of bearing out in reality. There's actually not just guys to come on, there's guys who come on and can affect the game now, and I think it's hard to underestimate how big a difference that can make to a team, really, especially one that's has maybe, if there's the odd guy struggling for confidence, or there's maybe guys who are having to start who have played so many games recently, are feeling a bit jaded, guys who are trying to get up to full fitness, and it really makes a huge difference, because I just felt like Hibs, they're in cruise control for a lot of that second half, and it's really not something we've been able to say too much, if at all, this season. Like, somebody could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a second half like that, certainly for a good while. Just in terms of individual players, you did touch on Dylan Levitt there as well. He looks more comfortable playing in that midfield three, just kind of eminently more comfortable. It's quite striking, and again, I know it was only 45 minutes yesterday, but I think he made an immediate difference when he came on. There just seemed to be just something a bit more about Hibs. His passing was quite incisive. He was floating into different areas, picking up spaces. He does link play well. He likes those wee round the corner passes first time. He can speed it up when necessary. He can slow it down when he needs to as well. And it's he's obviously a player that's been struggling a wee bit, and Nick Montgomery acknowledged that at his press conference before the Inverness game. He's saying we're asking him to adapt, but he's also played a lot of minutes. And he ended up playing an awful lot of minutes off the back of coming back from an injury as well. So again, it's one of those ones you don't want to kind of over egg it too much for a guy who has struggled of late, as when they have a good half against sort of lower bottom half championship opposition. You've kind of got to put it into that context, but I feel you can still take stuff from you can still take pointers from just the kind of general feel of the performance and what he was, the areas he was picking up, the passes he was playing. It was totally different to what we've been seeing from him, in terms of he's been coming in, taking the ball off the centre halves. He just sort of looked inhibited in terms of I feel even in the way that he was moving, getting around the pitch. He was obviously asked to be more disciplined, which is maybe not so much in his comfort zone. Because I was like, I went and watched some footage of him playing for Dundee United, and I know this is one of those cliched things that people say, but like, he did look like a completely different player. Like, just the way he was moving, the way he was getting about the pitch, he just looked more. He just looked. It's almost as if like the belief being sapped out of him was just kind of affecting literally everything about his game, even the way he was getting about the pitch. So when he's in that three, he does have a bit more license to get into higher areas. He doesn't quite have to. I mean, you still have to be disciplined. You still have to do your job and be aggressive. But he doesn't. It's not quite as big a responsibility as when you're a midfield two in there. And he just looks so much more comfortable on the ball, I think, in advanced areas rather than halfway inside his own half. So again, it's early days. It's early days on that one, but it's certainly a promising half yesterday from Levitt. He did look much better. I mean, there's no doubting the ability. It's just whether you can get that out of him on a weekly basis. And I suppose as well, there's maybe a question now about the midfield. The Hibs have gone from not having to play the same two guys in a midfield pairing every week to now having quite a lot of options in there because Joe Newell is he's captain in the side most weeks. I think Mariah Welsh brings a different skill set to everybody else that helps the rest, that should help the rest of it function, I think. So then you're sort of looking at then who's going to be the main man in that kind of third spot going forward? Is it going to be Levitt? Is it going to be Marcondes? I think a lot of people would think, on his reputation, that possibly the latter. But there is maybe kind of, as much as the midfield three looks better now, Patrick, I think there's going to be some decisions as to who fills it in terms of personnel, actually, which is quite a turnaround from just a few weeks ago.
There is, and I think that's what Nick Montgomery's been, harking after all this time, is that he just hasn't had the options. We've sat here, and I think there was a period of time where we didn't bother doing kind of predicted 11s for Hibs games because it was just always going to be the same people because there was literally no one else. You can make an argument and say, oh well, he might sort of bring him in, or he might start him if he wants to spring a surprise, but otherwise it's just going to be, it's going to have a beat at left back. You're going to have Rory Whittaker, Kanayo Megwa at right back. You're going to have, Joe Newell and Levitt at midfield. But it's what Hibs have been missing for so long, has just been, this ability to not only have competition for places, but also be able to change things, at the hour mark or at half time or with 20 minutes to go. And to not have to, change shape, change formation, and, to have like a kind of downturn in performance. I mean, you could call it an embarrassment of riches yesterday when you look at who Hibs were bringing off the bench. You're bringing off a player who's played, well, you're bringing on two players who played in the Premier League in their past careers. You've Marcondes and Lafondra. You've got Ellie Yuan, who, just obviously on his day can be a real threat in terms of goals and assists. You're bringing on Chris Cadden, who's got international caps for Scotland, guaranteed not recently, but, he's a player who was a kind of virtual ever-present last season. And, even in the players who start, you've got, Luke Amos, who's obviously played a lot of games in the Championship. You've got Mariah Welsh, very highly rated at Bournemouth. And, it's just sort of everywhere you look across the park, you could say, and I think we saw that yesterday, actually, that, in starting Mayenda and Amos, it's the chance to give them minutes. And, I think it'd be fair to say that both of them did look a little off the pace, but that is, I think that's to be expected when you consider that Amos is still sort of in the middle of this sort of, returning to play protocol, if you like. Montgomery's talked about this kind of, I think, 4 to 6 week period that he really needs to get up to speed before he can start contributing. But, he needs minutes as part of that. And, I don't think he disgraced himself yesterday.
No.
Mayenda's another one who hasn't had a lot of first team football, but needs that exposure to kind of get used to Scottish football, to get used to what's expected of him. But I think it's just that, we're now at a stage where if you look at the Hibs squad and who's available and who's still to come back, then, it's a really nice dilemma for Nick Montgomery and Sergio Raimundo to have, is who do we start? And obviously, like you say, competition for places is so big. And it's something that Hibs haven't had for so long, and it brings the best out of players if they think, right, well, I was starting every game from sort of November, December, January. Now there's like 2 or 3 guys breathing down my neck, so I've got to be on it in training, I've got to be on it in games, and it helps bring out the best in players. But with Montgomery putting so much focus on, with his subs, we've said this before, it's not a case of you pick your first 11 that they play for 70 minutes and then you start picking boys off as they get tired. The nature of the pressing game that Hibs play, and this sort of, I suppose it's kind of like, it's kind of non-stop, isn't it? It's just really kind of all action from minute 1 to, 90 plus. And having players who can come on and just pick up where the guy they replaced left off is huge. And as you say, when you're bringing on academy players, obviously nothing against them, but they're not going to have the same impact. You're not going to get the same impact from like a Josh Landers or Aberdeen Lotnikov as you're going to get from Emi Marcondes or Adam Lafondra. It's just a fact. It's nothing. It's not talking down the young players at all. It's just a fact. And Montgomery said this time and time again, and I think we were a little bit alarmed that it was just he was sort of setting so much in stone. Like, right, once we get these players back, or once we get players in January, then things will be a lot better. It's an easy thing to say, but in fairness, he said that repeatedly, and it is we are kind of seeing that he was there was truth in what he was saying, and I think that's. I mean, at the moment, I think you look at the team and you say Joe Newell starts, Nathan Mariah Welsh starts in midfield, and then that third spot, you think, well, depending on the opposition as well, there'll be some games where Levitt might be better suited. There'll be some games where Marcondes might be better suited, and it's the same with the front three as well. I think we saw against, especially against St Mirren, you had Yuan and Melida making the same runs, hugely frustrating. You've obviously got Dylan Vente, whose struggles have been sort of well documented recently, in a sort of a different formation. But I was a bit surprised that he didn't get any game time yesterday, but I can understand not.
I was a wee bit.
But I suppose if you can give your sort of main number 9 a rest, if you don't need him, then it's not only good for him to get a break, but it also sort of speaks volumes for the rest of the team. And
and I think Lafondra needed the minutes as well, didn't he? So that was
again, absolutely,
it's balance. It's checks and balances, really, isn't it?
Exactly, and he played a role in the third goal, whether it was intentional or not. I think his run sort of confused the Inverness defence a little bit because he was offside and then he stopped, and Martin Boyle obviously runs onto the ball, gets to the byline, cuts it back for Ellie Yuan for a tap in. So you think he's he is that sort of wily fox in the box type striker, but he does have that. Just that sort of footballing knowledge that some players don't have, that he's just built up during his career, that he can do little things like that and it'll come off. And it's just little things like that Hibs have been missing. But, you look at this, you look at the way they set up at the moment with this 4-3-3 and that front three, you can start Vente in the middle, you can have Boyle on the right and Yuan on the left, or you can start Mazzani in the centre, you can have, Mayenda on the left, Boyle on the right. You've just got so many options. And I just think that's something that will be really important going forward, not only for Montgomery to be able to mix it up depending on the opponent, but also just to freshen things up mid-game, but just still have the same level of intensity and the players who sort of know what they're being asked to do. It's not sort of you're not asking players to go in and play unfamiliar positions, which we did see a bit of when the boys were in international duty and there was that big long injury list. You've got players coming in and thinking, well, he's not really suited to that role, but what other options are there? And I think that'll make a big difference. There's obviously been a lot of talk recently about Hibs accounts and how they kind of speculated to accumulate last season and kind of overspent in terms of wages to try and get into Europe, which they did. And I think this season, obviously, the targets have to be the same. They've reached the semi-finals of the League Cup. They're at the quarterfinals of the Scottish Cup, and obviously, if they can reach the semi-finals, then that'll go a long way to, helping like the next set of accounts look a lot better. And then that's before you've got, the money from the European run at the start of this season. You've got Bill Foley's investment, so I think things are looking maybe a lot better at the moment. But I think it's very easy to get carried away and say, oh, Hibs are very good against Celtic, and then they were comfortably got into the next round of the cup, but. I just think next weekend, obviously against Aberdeen with Neil Warnock in place, it'll be another test. I think it'll be that'll probably give us more of an idea of how Hibs are looking now that they've got players back, that they've got new signings in the door who are now starting to settle. And some of those new signings they've been to Forfar, they've been to Inverness, so Aberdeen should be a scoosh. So it's
I might walk it.
But I think that there are some promising signs. There were some promising signs on Wednesday night that they built on yesterday. And I know you can say, oh, it's difficult to take too much from it because it's a championship side. But when you consider that Morton got past Motherwell, Partick gave Livingston a real scare.
Yeah, there's no gimmies, is there?
No, there absolutely are. There's not at all. Absolutely not. And so you don't want to put too much in store about it. You don't want to say, well, this is a great sign. Hibs are just going to be impervious until the end of the season. But I think from what we did see, for example, even this last weekend, 8 days ago, you look at it now and think things are actually looking a lot healthier than they were. And I think, it is baby steps, but it does bode well for what's to come. And, if they can continue where they left off against Inverness, against Aberdeen, and obviously you've got the benefit of maybe having a week in between where you're not having to worry about, midweek games and things like that. Players can get more of a rest. You can get more time to work with these players because, some of these players still haven't had that many training sessions, since they arrived. And I just think that'll be really helpful. You can work on the good bits and make them better. You can work on the bits that didn't quite work and, get them up to the same level as the rest. And, at this moment in time, I think next weekend's game should be a real good spectacle.
Yeah.
And obviously you kind of got, I know this is a bit hackneyed, but sort of like, master and apprentice in Neil Warnock and Nick Montgomery. So I think that'll be quite an interesting head-to-head, quite an interesting matchup. And I think, with Aberdeen on a bit of a kind of up as well, with a decent performance at Ibrox against Rangers, and then obviously they won yesterday. Bojan may obviously seem to be getting back into the sort of vein of form that probably got some Hibs fans worried.
Ominous form, I would say.
But I think if you could look at the performance yesterday, look at the performance on Wednesday night, there has to be optimism there, I think. And I think the management will use that and they'll say, look, that's what you did against Celtic, that's what you did against Inverness. There's no reason you can't do it again. And there could be the chance for bounce games, reserve matches in midweek as well, and that it's just getting minutes into guys. It doesn't need to be a top level game. It doesn't need to be a reserve game even. It can just be a bounce game, but just to get guys more familiar with the style of play, what's being asked of them, so that they can come out the blocks. Because that was the thing I noticed yesterday that maybe we didn't get a chance to see against Celtic because of the early penalty, but I felt him started really strongly, really quickly yesterday, and I think that's something that we've really not seen a lot of. And that's obviously down to the personnel available. But I don't want to get carried away, but it is just it's a cup win against against a team from a division below. But based on what we have seen and taking everything into account with players coming back, new signings settling, it's I think there are enough positives yesterday to suggest that there's a lot to build on, but it is starting to look like a corner has been turned, and obviously further games will be the kind of proof of that. But I think it's sort of 7 short days you've gone from thinking this is the absolute kind of nadir to thinking actually things aren't that bad. They've kind of come back from this, and it was a big test. Midweek, like playing Celtic after the St Mirren performance, you could argue best game to have to come back from, because it's under the lights, it's midweek, you're at home. But I mean, you saw the empty seats. It was obviously the St Mirren performance had just kind of scunnered a lot of fans. So to put in that performance and to be kind of so unfortunate in not getting something from the game, and then to put in that performance yesterday and comfortably get through, you just think that's they looked to bounce back from a really difficult kind of weekend last weekend. And now the sort of bonus is on them to sort of build and keep going from here on in, and kind of back up what they've been saying, what Montgomery's been saying, that this is a good team and they can put in the performances, and now you just have to show it on the pitch.
Yeah, I think the key point there is definitely it's not that it's all that everything's fixed, everything's fine now. I think, but I mean, when you put it in the context of where the mood was 7 days ago compared to now, if to get from that back to a position of tentative, cautious optimism, I think most people would have taken that last Sunday, definitely, considering the fixtures that were coming up. Celtic coming to Easter Road, and then a tricky Scottish Cup away tie up in the Highlands. I think a lot of people might have not believed you if you'd said that a week ago. Such was the mood in the camp. But yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. I think it's not that suddenly all the issues are gone, but I think at least now for the first time in a while, you can say that all the components are there for Hibs to start building. Which obviously, the kind of other way of looking at that is there's no more kind of no more excuses for this team not to start kicking on now. There's squad depth there now that a lot probably majority of teams in this league now would be pretty envious of the options that are there. So it's kind of now is the time that Hibs start to really need to show something to really start kicking on. Obviously third place that's gone now, but there's still the opportunity to kick on and get into Europe. A cup run I think would do wonders for morale, because obviously the being in the top six come the end of the season is obviously very important, but it's a race for the top six. It doesn't really capture fans' imagination as much. So just because fans' ambition for Hibs is, and quite rightly so, is it's not to be just competing for top six. It's to be pushing much higher than that. But that is kind of the reality that Hibs are facing at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out the hat for the draw later on today. I've not too much point speculating about it, because obviously there's still games to be played throughout the afternoon. But obviously, another cup run, getting back to Hampden, where I think obviously Nick Montgomery will feel he has a bit of unfinished business after what happened against Aberdeen the last time. Just before we finish up, Patrick, actually just a wee word for Chris Cadden. That was a really nice moment. Obviously you had that interview with him a few months ago now, and that was his first appearance since May yesterday. Really good moment for him to get himself back on the pitch, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's been a long road for him. I remember, it was at Tynecastle on May the 27th when he got that injury, and you could see straight away that it wasn't good. And my initial thoughts were, this could be potentially something that's going to keep him out for a long time. And then when they sort of confirmed it was, you just think he has no luck, because he had a similar kind of long-term injury, the sort of previous time Hibs were in Europe, and it happens again. So he's been at the club since I think since Jack Ross's time. There's been potentially 2 European campaigns he could have played in and he's missed, and that obviously hurts. But not being able to play week to week, when you can say you look at the kind of guy he is. He is sort of he's energetic. He's up and down that touchline. So much when he's playing from that right back position or right wing back, or even right midfield. And I just think when you have somebody like that, somebody who's just so naturally active, just being told you have to kind of sit there and not put any pressure on it, just take it easy.
Don't move, basically.
Exactly, yeah. And he said that in the interview. He was saying for like sort of the first sort of day or so, you're like, yeah, okay, this is fine. And then after that, you just think having to rely on having to rely on his partner, Caitlin's go and get him a cup of coffee and stuff like that, and just not being able to. The man missed his own stag do and things like that. It's been really tough. He's had a really difficult few months. But I think the difficult thing is when you have an injury like that, it's just coming back from it, and just that, it's almost in your head, like getting over it. Like you don't want to come back until you're 100% ready. But I think there's been a couple of games where he's maybe played behind closed doors, and also in training. He's had a couple where there's maybe been a big challenge, or he's been floored in the first 5 minutes, and I think you get that out of the way, and it's gone from your mind, and you can start kicking on, because you don't want a player who's sort of playing with that at the back of their mind. And in fairness, he's sort of said that in the past, that you can't sort of think oh, I better not do this because I might get hurt, or I might suffer a recurrence. You have to be psychologically ready to compete, and I think he's that sort of player. He's just this almost sounds like a kind of backhanded compliment, but he's just a kind of steady Eddie kind of guy, just sort of on and off the pitch. I think he's generally he's a reliable sort of player. You're maybe not going to get a performance out of him that changes the game, a la Martin Boyle, Ellie Yuan, or some of the other players. But you know what you're getting from him. You're getting a good sort of 7 out of 10 most weeks. And that again, that's something Hibs have been missing, and it's more competition at right back. Obviously he came on yesterday at right back. You did that article a few weeks back, positing the idea of him possibly playing on the right wing, although granted this was before Hibs, decided to go shopping in January and effectively bring in winger after winger after winger. So, it does very much look as though it's just going to be really between him and Lewis Miller for that right back berth. Which, obviously is no bad thing, to have those two players. Very different kind of players, but at the same time, you know what you're getting from them. And if it's maybe a little bit difficult to be expecting, Lewis Miller to do what he does for 90 minutes, then you can always bring, Chris Cadden on, and you know what you're going to get from him, or vice versa. If it's about resting players, or players being better suited for certain games, then you couldn't really ask for a better sort of collection of right backs to have. So, really good for him. Really good to see him back. The reception from the fans, I think, just shows, shows how highly they hold him. Just he's not the most fashionable player. He's not going to be everyone's sort of favourite, but he's just that sort of, like, he gets the club and, he always gives 100%. He's just one of those players who you need in the squad. And just, great for him to be back and, finally playing competitive games, because it has been a long time coming. And as we were saying earlier, just the squad is now starting to look really, really strong across the pitch. You've got at least two players competing for every spot who could arguably start, and that's something that Hibs haven't had for a long time. Not just this season, but even going back to the last couple of years. There's always been positions where you thought, well, if that player is injured, then Hibs are going to be a bit more blunt, because the replacement is not at the same level. And fair play to the recruitment team, to Nick Montgomery, Brian McDermott, for identifying that and for being able to bring players in who create squad depth and competition for places without having what is a bloated squad. Like it's looking healthy at the moment. There's a lot of players in there, but when you consider there will be some players who are probably playing for either new contracts or contracts come the summer, then there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yep. Aye, definitely great to see Chris Cadden back on the pitch. Really nice moment for him. If you haven't already, it is certainly worth checking out Patrick's interview with Chris from earlier on in the season when he was still in the midst of his recovery. You'll be able to find that on our website. A lot of kind of really candid stuff in there about his recovery and what it's been like, from just to give you an idea of the kind of path he's been on to get himself back on the pitch. And as well, actually later on tonight we will have kind of post-match reaction from Cadden, just how he felt about getting back on and amongst it. So it's certainly worth keeping an eye on our website for that coming out later this evening. But we're going to leave it there for today. Well, as I said, we'll be keeping a keen eye on the Scottish Cup draw later this afternoon to see where Hibs are off to next. Kind of just casting the briefest eye over it. There's some potentially really tough ties in there, but also a lot of opportunities as well, and you don't get anything easy once you get to this stage of the competition, of course. But that's all from us today, folks. As always, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you again soon. Cheers.